wholesaling. I didn't know too much about wholesaling until I started surrounding myself with real estate agents, people doing wholesaling, people doing flipping, etc. So for the people out there that don't know what wholesaling is, what is wholesaling and why is it popular?
So wholesaling is very popular because you're involved in a real estate transaction, but your commitment, the level of commitment that you have to it is not as it's more transactional. It's more shorter term. So you're taking this property, you're putting it under contract, and then you're assigning the contract or flipping the contract to someone else. Maybe you got this single family that you negotiated with the seller. Hey, the seller wants he'll take 270, and you know that once you've done your homework. Hopefully, you should have done your homework as a wholesaler, and you know that once it's rehabbed and brought back to life, maybe the market value is 400. So now you can flip that, assign that contract to someone else. So wholesaling, there are some recent changes, or maybe like over the last couple of years, certain places in the U.S. They don't allow wholesaling, or they've made it more difficult. But wholesaling is kind of across the board. I don't want to say easy because everything takes work, but it's a little simpler to get in because you can put a property under contract. Some people say for a couple hundred. I would say at least a couple thousand, at least, right? To put it under contract, and then you can assign it to someone.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's less risk because if I can't find a buyer, I usually have on the contract that you have certain contingencies. You know what I mean? So I got to be able to, obviously contingent on finding a buyer for, within a specified time. You don't want to have they call it the term tying up a property. You want to have a property under contract for 3 months and you haven't done anything with it. You know what I mean? So but it's a lot of people have done really well with wholesaling as well.
What about you, Jose? What's wholesaling?
Yeah, so essentially what Fabian said was the correct definition of wholesaling, right? You put a property under contract and you basically flip the contract, right? Now, the reason why it's popular is because, again, everybody thinks that they're going to get in with like no money down and it's going to be minimal work and you're just going to go into the office and make $1 million, right? Wholesaling real estate. And it doesn't work like that because, number one, you have to know about real estate. That's the first thing, because how are you going to put a property under contract if you don't understand the value of the property to begin with and why an investor would want to buy that property in the first place? Right. So, and also in regards to finding a deal, how are you going to go about finding the deal, right? It's not like deals are just magically going to fall on your lap. So you're either going to have to, whether it's driving for dollars is what they call it, right? Driving around the neighborhood, looking for different properties that are distressed or that look abandoned, skip tracing them, finding out the information, maybe possibly having to speak with the aunt of the owner, try to get to the owner because you don't have the owner's number, sending a mailer to fucking Africa to see if the person hits you back up. So there's so many different things when it comes down to it. And it is possible. I'm not saying that to discourage anybody from doing it, because I do think it's a great way to get into the business for folks that don't have a ton of money sitting down,
right?
Because it is you could say like a lower entry fee, for it, right? Like I've put a property under contract for $250 and I wholesaled it, So but it all depends, because then the person may have an attorney who may look at that and may be like, oh no, we're not gonna, minimum 5% down, or else you're not gonna be able to put the property under contract. And there's ways around that, but what I would say is wholesaling is something definitely to look into if you're looking to get into real estate. However, prepare to do the work, prepare to do the research, and prepare to be around the community that you can ask questions, because you're gonna come up with different questions as you start the process of finding that property. But essentially, that's what it is. Putting a property under contract, finding somebody that wants to buy it, and then making the middle spread between what you locked it in for and when the person's, buying it for.
So essentially, you're almost like the middleman.
Exactly.
Okay. So just so that I can understand, I'm not a professional in real estate. It's not my niche. So there's a property, you're helping the homeowner or the owner sell the property, you're finding the buyer, and essentially you're getting a fee for finding a buyer.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, okay, like, so you're essentially buying the property. So the owner, for the most part, always thinks that you're buying the property.
Okay.
But once you put it under contract, it's technically going to be your property anyways. So the mentality behind it is like, okay, well, this is technically already my property, and I locked it in, let's say, for $100,000. I know that it only needs, let's say, $20,000 worth of work. So, you know, and then I could resell it for $200,000 and make $80K. Well, you know what? Instead of making $80K, I would rather make $20K, you know, and not have to deal with finding the contractors that, you know, to fix the property, holding it for 3 months, putting it on the market, finding a buyer for it, showing it. I would rather not have to deal with any of that and just assign it to an investor that maybe is more willing to do that, has the time, or is more experienced to do that.
Got it. Okay.
So, you know, I can negotiate the contract to lock it in at a price where, let's say, for example, I lock it in at $100,000 and say, you know what, Brian, if you give me $120 for this property, I'll go ahead and assign it and assign the contract over to you.
Got
right?
it.
And then you say, okay, well, if I buy it at $120, I have a possibility of making $60K. And then when the closing happens, you make the middle spread. That's essentially how it works.